My name is Emma Blake. I am 33 years old. 6 years ago, my parents blindsided me by insisting I co sign for my older sister's business loans, swearing it was just temporary family help, while my grandfather Paul Carter's savings stayed untouched and safe in his accounts. I believed every word because I wanted to trust them. But today, in this tense lawyer's office here in Des Moines, everything exploded when the attorney slid across the polished table copies of old transfer records showing my parents had secretly siphoned off over $1,200,000 from my grandfather's accounts for my older sister's failed ventures and their own lifestyle upgrades over the last 11 years. My stomach dropped as my mother leaned forward with that familiar smile. I knew in that moment I had to break free from their web of lies once and for all.
If you have ever felt your own parents turn family trust into a trap that slowly chokes the life out of you, drop a comment below and tell me what happened. I read every single one, and knowing I am not alone somehow makes this easier to share. Let me take you back to how we got here, because none of this started in that lawyer's office. It started with the small violations that piled up so quietly, I almost missed them until they became impossible to ignore. I work as an office manager at a mid-sized insurance firm on the east side of Des Moines, the kind of job where I keep the schedules straight, chase down claims, and try to leave at 5 so I can actually have a life. My apartment is nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with decent light and neighbors who mostly keep to themselves. I liked it that way. Quiet, controllable. Unlike everything else in my family, my parents had always been the center of our little universe.
My mother ran the household like a general voice, sweet on the surface, but edged with steel when things did not go her way. My father worked construction management for 28 years before retiring early, and he liked to play the easygoing guy who just wanted everyone to get along. My older sister was the golden project, the one whose every idea deserved funding and praise. I was the steady one, the reliable daughter who never made waves. Or at least that is what they told me. The first crack appeared 4 years ago when my grandfather, who lived in a quiet assisted living place on the south side of town, started mentioning, in passing, that some of his monthly statements looked off. He was 82, then sharp as ever, but slowing down physically. I offered to help him review things, but my mother waved me off during a Sunday call. Emma, sweetheart, your grandfather gets confused about numbers sometimes. We are handling it. You focus on your job and let us be the parents. Her tone was light, almost playful, but the message landed like a door shutting. My father chuckled on the line and changed the subject to the weather. Come on, the girl is just trying to help. Anyway, did you see that new diner opened up near the Capitol? I let it drop, because pushing back always felt like swimming upstream. But the small violations kept coming. A few months later, my older sister needed another infusion for her latest boutique idea, something about custom jewelry that never quite took off. My mother called me at work, voice dripping concern. Your sister is so close this time, Emma. If you could just transfer a little from your savings to help bridge the gap, we will pay you back with interest. Family sticks together right, I hesitated. She sighed the exact sigh she used when I was 12 and forgot to clean my room. I knew you would make this difficult. After everything we have done for you. My father jumped in then, with his favorite deflection, a loud laugh, followed by, let's not turn this into a whole thing, girls. Emma, we will figure it out without drama. I wired the money that afternoon, telling myself it was temporary. Rachel Bennett, my best friend since high school, was the only person I told. We met for coffee at our usual spot near the Riverwalk a week later. She stirred her latte and frowned. Emma, that is the third time this year. You are not their bank. I shrugged it off because admitting it felt disloyal. But Rachel planted the seed that maybe I needed to ask my grandfather directly. The next small violation came during a casual visit to my grandfather's assisted living apartment. I brought him his favorite lemon cookies and we sat on the tiny patio. He looked tired but clear-eyed. Emma, I keep seeing these withdrawals I never authorized. Your parents keep telling me not to worry.
Before I could press him, my mother appeared in the doorway, unannounced, carrying a casserole like she had planned the whole thing. Dad, you're worrying Emma over nothing again? Frank and I have power of attorney for a reason. We are protecting your future." My grandfather started to speak, but my father, who had followed her in, suddenly stood up and clapped his hands. "Who wants to watch the game?" I brought the big screen tablet. The conversation died right there. I left feeling uneasy the way you do when you know something important just got buried. Those moments stacked up like quiet snow before an avalanche. My mother would text me at odd hours with little guilt jabs. "Your sister is struggling again. Remember how we always helped you through college?" My father would follow up with a voice note voice, cheerful but firm. "Do not overthink it, kiddo. We are all in this together." I started keeping a private note on my phone dates and amounts, nothing dramatic, just facts.
I told myself I was being paranoid. Then came the lawyer's office. The summons arrived by certified mail 2 weeks ago. My grandfather had instructed his longtime attorney, Stephen Hayes, to gather the family for an urgent review of his financial directives. No one told me why it was urgent, only that attendance was expected. I drove across town on a gray Tuesday morning, stomach already in knots. When I walked into the conference room, my parents were already seated on one side of the long table. My older sister sat between them, scrolling her phone like this was an inconvenience. My cousin Nathan Whitaker, who had flown in from Kansas City because my grandfather had specifically asked him to be there, gave me a small wave from the far end. He had always been the neutral relative, the one who stayed out of the drama. Stephen Hayes cleared his throat and began. "Paul Carter is still of sound mind and wanted these records reviewed while he is able to participate by video from his room."
The screen flickered on, and there was my grandfather looking frail but determined. My mother smiled at the camera. "Dad, we are all here for you." But then Stephen slid the packet across to each of us. The first page was a summary of account activity spanning 11 years, transfers I had never seen, amounts that added up to over $1,200,000, every single one initiated with documents my parents had signed using my grandfather's power of attorney. Some of the money had gone to my older sister's business accounts. Some had gone to my parents' home renovation and vacations. None of it had been discussed with me. My mother's smile never wavered. "Stephen, these are old misunderstandings. Frank and I were simply managing things so Dad would not have to worry." My father leaned back and let out that same loud laugh I had heard 100 times. "Exactly. No need to drag the whole family into old paperwork. Let's focus on what Dad needs now."
But my grandfather's voice came through the speaker, steady and quiet. "I asked for Emma because she notices when things do not add up. I want her to see everything." The room went still. My older sister looked up from her phone for the first time. My mother's eyes flicked to me sharp for half a second before the sweet mask slipped back on. "Emma, honey, you have always been so dramatic about numbers. This is not the time." My stomach twisted tighter. I could feel the walls of the room closing in the same way they had every time my parents rewrote reality to suit their story. That was when my phone buzzed under the table. A text from my coworker, Lisa Collins, who had covered my shift that morning. "Hey, just saw your mother in the parking lot earlier. She was asking if the company had any family leave policies for supporting aging parents. Seemed odd. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen. My mother had never mentioned anything about my job to me.
The realization hit like cold water. She was already preparing the next guilt trip, the next request for me to drop everything and fix whatever mess they had created. I looked up and met my grandfather's eyes on the screen. He gave the smallest nod. In that moment, the pieces snapped together. Every small violation, every deflected conversation, every time my father laughed and changed the subject, it had all been building to keep me compliant and blind. My mother leaned forward again, voice soft, but laced with that familiar edge. "Emma signed the updated directive so we can keep handling this smoothly. It is what family does," my father added, still smiling. "Come on, kiddo. Do not make this harder than it has to be." My hand hovered over the pen Stephen had placed in front of me. The air felt thick, the kind of thick that comes right before a storm breaks.
I knew if I signed it would be just another small violation in a long line that would eventually bury me the same way it had nearly buried my grandfather. But if I did not, I pulled my hand back slowly, the pen rolling a few inches across the glossy table. My mother's eyes narrowed just enough for me to catch it. She leaned forward, voice still honey sweet, but now edged with something sharper. Emma, honey, do not do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. You have always been the one who makes everything harder than it needs to be. Your grandfather is counting on us to keep things smooth, and you are turning a simple signature into some kind of accusation. After everything we have sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us. The words landed like a slap. I had been waiting 11 years to feel. My older sister shifted in her seat, eyes flicking between us, but she said nothing. My father suddenly sat up straighter, his face flushing with a burst of unexpected anger that caught every one of us off guard. Your mother is right, Emma. If you keep pushing this nonsense, we might as well tell your grandfather right now that you are the reason his final years are full of stress. Is that what you want? To be the daughter who made an old man's last days miserable? His voice was loud, almost theatrical, the kind of outburst that shocked the room into silence, because it came from him, the man who always played the peacemaker. Stephen Hayes cleared his throat again, sliding another sheet from the folder. I think we should look at the actual transfer logs before anyone says anything else. Paul Carter specifically asked me to show these to Emma first. The new page listed every withdrawal in neat columns, $1,200,000, dates stretching back 11 years, transfers to accounts I recognized as my older sister's failed boutique ventures.
Transfers to my parents' joint credit cards for home upgrades they had bragged about on family calls. My mother's smile tightened. Those were loans, Stephen, family loans. Emma knows how this works. She has borrowed from us plenty of times herself. I felt my cheeks burn, but before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel Bennett. I had texted her a quick summary of the meeting, on my way in, and now her message read, Emma, if they are cornering you in there, do not sign anything. I can be there in 20 minutes if you need backup. The timing felt like a lifeline, but it also made the room feel even smaller. Nathan Whitaker finally spoke up from the end of the table. Frank, that is not what Paul wanted. Emma has every right to ask questions. My mother ignored him completely and turned back to me, her voice dropping into that familiar tone she used when she wanted to make me feel small. Emma, you are embarrassing us all. Your sister has been building something real, and you are sitting here acting like we are criminals because we helped her. If you walk away from this family now, do not expect any of us to be there when you need help someday. My father, still riding the wave of his earlier outburst, added in a lower voice that somehow made it worse. And think about what this will do to your grandfather. One phone call from me, and he could change every directive he has. Is that the kind of daughter you want to be? The mini cliffhanger hit me hard. Right then, the idea that my parents could still reach my grandfather and twist the narrative before I had a chance to explain. I glanced at the video screen. My grandfather was watching everything, his expression unreadable, but his eyes locked on mine. Stephen Hayes seemed to sense the shift and jumped in. Paul has already updated his directives. Emma is named as the primary contact for all financial matters going forward. Any changes now would require his direct approval in writing, witnessed by me. That should have been a victory, but my mother recovered instantly. Her next words, laced with fresh venom. Well, is not that convenient? Emma, you have been whispering in your grandfather's ear this whole time, have you not? Playing the perfect granddaughter while the rest of us actually show up and do the hard work? My older sister finally chimed in, echoing her exactly. Yeah, Emma, some of us have real responsibilities. You just sit in your little office job and judge everyone else. My phone buzzed a third time. It was Lisa Collins from work again. She had dug a little deeper after my mother's suspicious call to human resources. The message said my mother had tried to access my employee file indirectly by claiming she was helping with family medical forms and had even asked about my accrued leave balance for the next 18 months. The realization that my mother was already positioning me to quit and step in as unpaid family fixer made my hands go clammy. I read the text aloud because hiding it would only give them more power. My mother's eyes flashed with fresh contempt. Emma, you are twisting everything again. I was simply being a concerned parent, checking on your benefits, in case your grandfather needs more help. You always make me out to be the villain, when all I have ever done is hold this family together while you play independent in your little office job. The jab landed hard, exposing how she had never seen my career as anything more than a temporary phase I would eventually abandon for them. My older sister nodded along, adding her own quiet echo. Some of us actually contribute, Emma. You just take and judge.
The first mini cliffhanger hit when Stephen Hayes stood up and excused himself for a moment to make a quick call to an investigator he knew, saying the new details from my grandfather's note warranted an immediate review of the full transaction history. While he stepped out, my father remained standing arms, crossed his face, still that unnerving blank mask that made the silence heavier than any shouting. He did not speak again right away, but the way he looked at me suggested he was already calculating how to cut me out completely if I did not fall in line. It left me wondering if this was the moment the family I had known simply dissolved. Rachel Bennett must have sensed something was wrong, because my phone lit up with her incoming call next. I answered on speaker again, and her voice came through strong and clear. Emma, I am in the parking lot downstairs. I left work early when your text stopped making sense. Do you need me up there? Her timing was perfect, but it also escalated everything because my mother immediately turned on the charm for the room's benefit. Rachel, darling, this is a private family matter. Emma is just being emotional. You know how she gets. The sarcasm dripped, making it clear my mother saw any outside support as a threat to her control. Nathan Whitaker stood up then and offered to walk down and escort Rachel up if I wanted a neutral witness present. The second mini cliffhanger came when my older sister's suddenly blurted out voice. Tight with panic, she could not quite hide that they had already moved another $250,000 from my grandfather's main account into a holding fund for safety just yesterday. My mother's smile returned slow and satisfied. Too late to stop it now, Emma. The paperwork is signed and filed. Signing this directive today would simply make everything official and keep the peace. Stephen Hayes returned at that exact moment, phone still in hand, and announced that his investigator contact had already pulled preliminary records showing discrepancies going back even further than the 11 years we had seen. My grandfather's voice crackled through the speaker, one last time, weak but determined. Emma, do not sign anything until you see what is in that box. I trusted the wrong people for too long. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I looked around the table at my mother's expectant stare, my father's cold silence that promised permanent isolation if I pushed back, and my older sister's nervous fidgeting. For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of choosing myself over their version of family. My hand stayed away from the pen. I am not signing. I want a full independent audit, and I want access to everything my grandfather has saved. If that means I step away from all of this until it is sorted, then that is what I will do. My mother's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. You will regret this, Emma. We will make sure of it. My father finally broke his silence with one last shocking whisper, meant only for me, as he passed behind my chair on his way to the door. Enjoy being alone, then. The threat lingered heavy and final, leaving me to wonder how deep the isolation would actually go once the meeting ended. But the real gut punch came when Stephen Hayes looked down at a fresh email on his laptop and his face changed. There's one more transfer logged this morning. $200,000 moved to an account in your older sister's name. It was authorized under the existing power of attorney right before this meeting started. The room went dead quiet. My mother's eyes met mine across the table, and for the first time, I saw something close to real panic beneath the mask. Whatever came next, I knew the family I'd grown up with was already fracturing in ways that might never heal.
I took a deep breath and answered the call right there in the middle of the meeting, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear, because hiding anything at this point felt pointless. The voice on the other end belonged to a calm nurse from the assisted living center. She said my grandfather had just finished a tense phone conversation with my parents only minutes before the meeting started, and he was stable but clearly agitated. He had insisted they connect me immediately because he had been keeping his own private records for the last 7 years, tracking every single withdrawal he never authorized. The nurse read a short note he dictated on the spot. He wanted me to know those records were in a locked box under his bed, and only I was to open it. No one else. My mother's face went tight for half a second before she leaned across the table with that cutting smile she reserved for moments when she wanted to make me feel like the problem. Emma, honey, you're causing your grandfather unnecessary stress by dragging this out in front of everyone. He is 82 years old. Do you really want to be the reason he spends his final years worrying over paperwork that we already handled perfectly well? Her words were laced with that long-held resentment, the kind that suggested I had never quite measured up to what she expected from a daughter. It hit straight in the gut, reminding me of every time she had made me feel like the difficult one for simply asking questions. My father, who had been standing after his earlier outburst, suddenly went completely stone-faced. He stared at the phone like it had personally betrayed him, then leaned in close enough that only I could hear the whisper he delivered right in front of the entire room. If you ruin this for us now, you will never see your grandfather again, and it will be your fault entirely. The words were so cold and so final that the air left my lungs.
It was not the loud anger from before or the deflecting laugh I had grown used to. This was a quiet, calculated cutoff that felt like a door slamming shut on 11 years of family ties. And it shocked me more than any raised voice ever could, because it came from the man who had always pretended to be the reasonable one. Even my older sister looked momentarily thrown by it. Stephen Hayes raised an eyebrow and jotted something down, while Nathan Whitaker cleared his throat and spoke up firmly. Frank, that is not how we are doing this. Paul Carter asked for Emma specifically, and I am here as witness if she wants to open those records or request an independent audit. This does not have to turn ugly. Rachel Bennett burst into the room, right then escorted by the receptionist, her face set in that protective way only a best friend of 15 years could manage. Emma, I heard enough from the hallway. Do not let them bully you into signing anything. Lisa Collins had texted again, too confirming that my mother's call to human resources had been logged as suspicious and that my boss wanted to speak with me privately later. The pieces were falling into place faster than I could process, each one showing how my parents had been orchestrating the next phase of their control for months. Stephen Hayes cleared his throat and slid the final folder across to me. Paul Carter's private records from the last 7 years are being couriered over now. They show unauthorized transfers totaling $970,000, all funneled through accounts your parents and older sister controlled. The latest $200,000 move this morning is already frozen pending review. My grandfather's voice came through the speaker one more time, faint but steady. Emma, take the box when it arrives. Then decide for yourself. I am sorry I did not see it sooner. My mother's laugh was sharp and ugly, now the mask completely gone. You are choosing to destroy this family over paperwork, Emma. After everything we sacrificed to keep you in college and give you a stable life, your father and I have been the ones here every single day while you played independent. If you walk away now, we will make sure no one in this family speaks to you again. Not me, not your father, not your sister. You will be completely alone. My father nodded, once that same eerie calm still on his face. She is right. We have already discussed it. One more push from you and the door closes for good. No more holidays, no more calls, no more pretending you are part of us. The threat landed like a quiet bomb, exposing the long-held resentment they had both carried the way they had always seen me, as the expendable one who could be cut loose if I stopped being useful. My older sister looked away, but she did not contradict them. The second mini cliffhanger hit when Stephen Hayes' phone rang, and he stepped out briefly, returning with news that the assisted living center had confirmed my grandfather wanted me listed as his sole financial contact, effective immediately, but only if I agreed to it in writing right now. I looked around the table at the faces I had known my whole life. The same people who had turned every small request into a test of loyalty for 9 years.
Rachel squeezed my shoulder from behind, and Nathan gave me a small nod of support. Lisa's last text flashed in my mind. My job was still secure, but any family leave request would be scrutinized. I picked up the pen, but instead of signing the directive my parents wanted, I wrote a single sentence on the bottom of the page. I decline all power of attorney involvement and request full independent audit. Then I slid it back to Stephen. My mother's eyes widened. You will regret this for the rest of your life, Emma. We will make sure of it. My father stood up without another word, that cold calculation still etched on his face, and walked out, first my older sister trailing behind him, like she had been waiting for the cue. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. Stephen handled the paperwork quietly, promising to coordinate with an independent forensic accountant. Nathan offered to drive me to the assisted living center later to retrieve the locked box. Rachel stayed right by my side, whispering that she would help me through whatever came next. The next 3 weeks were a blur of quiet consequences. The audit confirmed everything my grandfather's records showed, but because my parents had used legal loopholes with the original power of attorney, the process dragged on without quick arrests or dramatic courtroom scenes.
My grandfather passed away peacefully 2 months later, leaving a simple will that named me as beneficiary for a modest savings account he had kept hidden separately, just enough to cover basic bills while I figured out the rest. I never saw my parents at the small service. They had already spread the word through the extended family that I had caused his stress and was no longer welcome. My cousin Nathan tried to mediate once, but my father's response was the same chilling calm. The door was closed, and it would stay closed. I went back to my office job the following Monday, the one I had fought to keep, despite my mother's calls to human resources. Lisa Collins became more than a coworker. She was the one who sat with me during lunch breaks when the loneliness hit hardest. Rachel moved in for a few weeks to help with the paperwork and the quiet nights when I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life.
There were no big revenge moments, no dramatic restitution checks, no tearful apologies from my family. The transfers were slowly traced, but the money had been spent years ago on my older sister's failed businesses and my parents' upgrades. The courts ordered partial repayment over time, but it felt distant and impersonal. I changed my number after the third voicemail from my mother, the one where she called me selfish and said I had ruined the family for good. My father never reached out directly, but I heard through Nathan that he had updated all the family documents to exclude me entirely. The isolation settled in slowly, like a fog that never quite lifted. Family holidays came and went without a single text. My older sister posted photos on social media of their gatherings, the ones I was no longer invited to, and each one stung like a fresh reminder that I had chosen myself and paid the price in loneliness.
6 months later, I sat in my apartment. One quiet evening, the locked box from my grandfather open on the coffee table. Inside were his careful notes, the same patient handwriting that had tracked every unauthorized withdrawal. At the bottom was a short letter addressed only to me. He wrote that he wished he had been stronger sooner, that he understood why I had to step away, and that choosing peace was never a failure, even if it left you standing alone. I read it 3 times, then folded it away. I did not call my parents. I did not reach out to my older sister. The boundaries stayed firm because going back would have meant stepping into the same web of guilt and coercion that had nearly swallowed me whole. I kept my job, kept my small circle with Rachel and Lisa and Nathan when he visited. But the empty chair at holiday tables and the unanswered calls from distant relatives reminded me every day what I had given up. There was no triumphant new chapter with sudden wealth.
There was just me learning to sit with the quiet and the knowledge that some family ties break cleanly and stay broken. The truth had cost me the only family I had ever known, but it had also given me the one thing they could never take away: the freedom to stop being their reliable fixer.